The piercing sound of the alarm clock broke the morning silence. It rang as usual precisely at 5 o'clock. Outside, it was still dawn. Only a few minutes remained until sunrise, and through the heavy blue hue, the first rays of the sun were already breaking through. It was still dark, and Paula didn't feel like getting up at all. The thick night curtains stubbornly refused to let the dawn into the house. What was even more disheartening was the thought that most people weren't even considering waking up at this hour and were sleeping soundly in their warm beds. Some alone, others with their loved ones or spouses. Or at least with their beloved dog. Paula had neither. And what saddened her the most was the absence of the adjective beloved in her life. I'll lie down just a little longer. There won't be any supervisor this morning anyway. I can linger a bit, Paula thought without opening her eyes. She pulled the tapestry blanket she had recently bought from Silva even tighter around herself. Such blankets were popular despite being expensive. But for someone who loves comfort, it was a splendid purchase. And Paula was exactly such a person. Comfort and neatness in everything. Meanwhile, in the mind of the young 25-year-old girl, one vivid scenario after another, as it often happens in the early hours before dawn, unfolded. She imagined a handsome man beside her, then a beloved spouse, then a passionate lover. Stop. It was already 5:10 on the clock. The girl jumped out of bed and found herself in the bathroom in a matter of seconds. First thing, she looked at herself in the mirror. A beautiful girl with expressive eyes and long black hair looked back at her. They were her special pride. Black curly locks, one ringlet after another. As if someone carefully curled them overnight, so that by morning, their owner would have a beautiful hairstyle. Paula smiled at the beauty staring back at her in the mirror and began to wash up. Black coffee and hot toast were Paula's traditional breakfast. She prepared it with the same agility as she got out of bed. Putting on her favorite jeans and t-shirt, she rushed out of the apartment to catch the first bus. Hello, Paula, the middle-aged driver greeted the first passenger with a friendly smile. As usual, heading to Porta? Paula nodded in confirmation and returned the smile. She paid him and took a seat by the window, leaning against it, ready to once again immerse herself in the morning drowsiness and finish watching her dreams. At the next stop, more people started to board, and continuing her morning sleep became impossible. A bearded gentleman sat down next to her and unfolded a newspaper. She began to read an article about another rise in stock market rates with interest. Financial matters didn't interest her much, so she soon grew bored of it. Although she was not a foolish girl. Porta, her stop was announced, and squeezing through the crowd, the girl began to make her way to the exit. The long bus journey finally ushered in the morning, and the bright sun that appeared in the sky promised beautiful weather. Paula was one of those people who rejoiced in every pleasant moment or event. It often happens when nature deprives someone of something. They cherish life more and appreciate the opportunity to enjoy every moment of it. Paula, however, was born mute. Hello, Paula. You look great. A slender young man of about 20, who was walking towards her, waved in greeting. It was Andrea. He worked nearby. Paula smiled in response and continued on her way. She was running a little late, so she picked up her pace. It's okay, don't worry. The manager isn't here yet, Manuela replied to her as Paula attempted to gesture an apology for being late. Manuela was her partner. She had already put on her uniform and started preparing the dining area for customers. Both of them worked as cleaners at the cafe. Cafe Mercadito was located in the heart of the city and was a favorite spot not only for locals but also for tourists. It opened early in the morning, welcoming visitors with aromatic coffee and fresh pastries. For those who wanted, they prepared ham omelets. Tourists loved to come here for breakfast, although the locals preferred to have their morning coffee at home. I'll have an Americano coffee and your cheesy bun, a typical early guest would order from the waiter. He would then sit by the window and start observing the locals passing by. It was a wonderful opportunity to observe their habits and manners, which couldn't fail to interest a visitor. After all, that's why they embark on journeys, to learn how people live in other countries. Outside the window, beautiful girls with bright makeup and revealing outfits flitted by. Their outfits were so revealing that you could see what was underneath. Men, as a rule, wore shorts and tank tops. But both groups were characterized by a passionate temperament and vivid emotions, which they didn't hesitate to express right on the street. "Hey, did your wife give birth already?" "Yes, 3 days ago." "Were you there for the birth?" "Of course, from start to finish." "Yeah, it's great to see new life being born." You could hear dialogues like this on the streets of this hot southern city. There were no forbidden or uncomfortable topics here. People talked about absolutely everything they lived and cared about. So, conversing with them, you could learn about their lives in the smallest details. Well, or observing from the stained glass cafe while enjoying morning coffee. Paula was a little different. Her physiological disadvantage made her somewhat closed off from communication. Although everyone loved her, she was very kind. Often among adults, you could encounter anger, envy, and much more unpleasantness. Paula didn't have any of that. That's why you wanted to wish her a good morning and smile when you met her. "Paula, I've already wiped the windowsills and watered the flowers. All that's left for you is to polish the tables to a shine so that the customers can see their reflection in them," Manuela said as if she were her older sister. They really were close. The dark-skinned woman took it upon herself to look after this fragile, defenseless girl. And she did it quite well. Especially when it came to the cafe owner. He was very arrogant and conceited. But he particularly enjoyed mocking the weak and defenseless. Like Paula. The door of the cafe swung open, and the manager appeared in the doorway. His name was Pedro. He was the right hand of the owner and tried to emulate him in everything, even in attire. He wore a gray strict suit, which he complimented with his serious demeanor. "Let's get to work, let's get to work. The first guests will be here soon," he usually encouraged all the cafe staff in the mornings. With these words, this workday began. Pedro cast his gaze over everyone in the room at that moment. Then he nodded approvingly, apparently expressing his satisfaction that everyone was in their positions and fulfilling their duties. Then he went off to the kitchen. "You can't imagine how much I fear him. I get goosebumps all over my body when he looks at me with that stern gaze," Manuela confided to Paula. She was a newcomer and didn't have citizenship, so she was very afraid of losing her job. Therefore, she was very accommodating to all management. But she never betrayed or framed anyone. Paula respected her greatly for that. Paula, on the other hand, always maintained a sense of her own dignity in everything and under no circumstances allowed herself to be humiliated. Even when the owner yelled at her for no reason. Just because he was the owner. At those moments, she stood before him with her head held high. This irritated him even more, causing him to blush like a lobster and shout even louder. In the dining room, the waiters were already setting the tables for the arrival of guests, while Paula and Manuela retreated to the utility room. Here were mops, rags hanging, and various containers of chemicals used for cleaning and disinfection. The girls settled in the corner of the room, each lost in her own thoughts. "You know, Paula, I didn't come here for this at all," Manuela broke the silence. "I came here for a prestigious job in a beautiful office, for family happiness with a loving spouse and a bunch of kids. And in the end, I work as a cleaner and live with an alcoholic who drinks away all his earnings. Yes, all my dreams remain just dreams." "A person shapes their own destiny," Paula replied with gestures. They had been working together for many years, so Manuela understood her perfectly well. "Do you like your destiny? Is this what you wanted in life?" The woman suddenly flared up. "I still have everything ahead of me," Paula replied. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I missed something in my life. Maybe there was that lucky chance that went unnoticed. Or maybe I'll still have it all. Isn't that right?" She looked questioningly at the girl, and she nodded affirmatively in response. Manuela sighed with relief. The workday was in full swing. The cafe doors opened and closed repeatedly to let in new guests or to send off those who had already enjoyed the excellent cuisine. We can offer you feijoada. And if you like seafood, then you simply must try vatapa. The waiters competed to offer the cafe's top dishes to the guests. Both locals and tourists loved this place. It was located right in the city center, where the offices of major companies were situated. Therefore, their employees often popped in here for lunch. Tourists, on the other hand, were attracted by the variety of local cuisine offered in this establishment. What else does a person need when they come here for the first time, if not to enjoy the local delicacies? Usually at this time of day, the owner would appear. He was a tall and slender man. He always looked very representative, as he preferred business suits. His black hair was always neatly trimmed, and he liked to run his hand through it, adjusting his hairstyle. His name was Enrique. "Are you enjoying everything with us?" he politely, with a fake smile on his face, addressed the guests. "Yes, everything is simply wonderful. Both the cuisine and the service are top-notch," they usually replied. Indulging his vanity, he made his way to the utility room. Always impeccably dressed in a suit, yet he failed to command respect from his employees. Quite the opposite, in fact. There was hatred and disgust towards him due to his despicable character. Yet, everyone feared him. "Where is that useless wench?" he addressed his staff. "She's in the utility room with Manuela," came the response. "During peak hours? What is she doing there?" The doors to the utility room swung open, and the angry boss stood before the women. Manuela immediately cowered in fear. She was very afraid of him, not so much because of him, but because of the possibility of losing her job. With her migrant background, being fired meant ending up on the streets. Paula was not at all fazed by the boss's presence. She looked at him questioningly. "Why are you here? Don't you have anything better to do?" Manuela replied. "Sir, we prepared the hall and left to not disturb the guests," Manuela answered. "It's about time to tidy up in there. There's garbage and dirt on the floor. You know it's full of guests, which means lots of trash. So I don't see you here anymore," he said, his face turning red with anger, spittle flying from his mouth. The women calmly stood up, gathered their belongings, and headed towards the exit. "You stay," he said, gesturing to Paula. He closed the door behind Manuela and proceeded with his usual business, humiliating and insulting the defenseless girl. "You ungrateful creature! Have you completely lost your shame? I hired you out of pity. I run a decent establishment, and I could have found fully capable people to work. At least not deaf, like you." Paula gestured that she wasn't deaf but mute. But he didn't understand. So she took a sheet of paper and wrote the same thing. This further angered him. "You wretch, are you going to teach me?" With these words, he swung and hit her in the face. The girl turned away, but didn't show any sign of pain. She turned back to him, looking him in the eye with contempt. He swung again and hit her once more. His handprints were now visible on her face, and that seemed to bring him to his senses. "Fine, you're off today," he said, shaking himself, adjusting his clothes, running a hand through his hair, and then left. Poor man, Paula thought. What happened in his life that accumulated so much anger within him? She often asked herself this question but didn't have an answer yet. The girl was accustomed to humiliation. She had often faced such treatment in her life. Look, the mute is coming. Hey, mute, say something to me. Come on, why are you silent? Some boy would run after her in school, blocking her way. Girls were more condescending, but still not loving. Her only friend and support was her mother. Paula, you're such a beauty. Don't pay attention to the others. They're just jealous of you. Jealous of your beauty and your intelligence, her mother would encourage her. Perhaps there was some truth in her words. The girl was indeed very beautiful. And secretly, every boy dreamed of dating her but was afraid of being laughed at by others. And the girls were envious. They envied her black, thick, curly hair and her beautiful features that made her a true beauty. Her mother had long been gone, but she managed to instill important qualities in her daughter: self-belief and resilience. Qualities that would help her navigate this difficult world. Paula entered the hall to join Manuela in cleaning up. "Did he hit you again?" Manuela noticed the redness on her face. "I'm fine," she replied with gestures. And they proceeded to tidy up the hall, not disturbing the guests and not causing them any inconvenience. "Paula, how are you?" The girl turned around and saw Andrea behind her, the same young man she had met earlier in the morning. She nodded politely and, so as not to attract the attention of the boss, who had been in the hall all this time, continued cleaning up. Andrea handed her a note and sat down at the table to have lunch. He worked in the neighboring office and almost every day came here. The young man had long noticed Paula. She immediately caught his eye. And now he was trying to get her attention in every possible way. He even started learning sign language. The note read, "I'll be waiting for you at the entrance at the end of the workday. What do you think about this?" Manuela asked when Paula showed her the note. Paula shrugged. And what else is there to think? Such a presentable young man, working in an office. It's obvious he's very well-mannered. And he really likes you. He only comes to our cafe for you, Manuela instructed her friend. But Paula remained silent. She had long noticed that she liked Andrea. But, unfortunately, she couldn't boast the same. Yes, he was a very nice guy. But nothing more. That's what held her back. What if she couldn't reciprocate? She was afraid of giving him hope, so she ignored all his signs of attention. But this time Manuela was adamant. Don't even think about refusing him. You can just talk to him. It doesn't commit you to anything. You're a young, beautiful girl. You should communicate with men. Besides, remember our morning conversation. What if this is your destiny? Don't miss it." Those words had the strongest effect on Paula. Indeed, communicating with Andrea didn't commit her to anything. And she did miss male attention. Just as any young girl her age would miss attention and affection if she were single. When Paula left the cafe after the end of the workday, Andrea was already waiting for her at the entrance. It was 10 p.m., and the streets were noticeably empty. But you could still encounter tourists or young couples strolling around. "Tired?" Andrea looked at her questioningly. Paula reached for her purse to write a response, but the young man stopped her. "You can use gestures." The girl looked at him with surprise. "Don't be surprised. I've been learning sign language for a while now, and I understand some things already." And they switched to communicating through gestures. "I live far away, on the outskirts of the city, in the Silva area," Paula said. "No problem. I'm completely free until morning," Andrea joked. He was happy that the girl finally agreed to meet him. And he was ready for any, even the most outrageous actions. It was written all over his face. And his words made the girl feel very pleased. Paula wasn't accustomed to male attention. Or rather, she had none at all. Yes, she was attractive. But as soon as young men realized she had a flaw, they immediately backed off from their intentions. Andrea was the first one to dare to enter a relationship with her. "Is anyone waiting for you at home?" she asked him. "No, I live alone. I have an apartment in Maddalena." "Must be very beautiful there?" "Yes, we have very modern architecture and lots of greenery. My windows overlook the famous Jardine Park." "I've never been there." "Then I invite you." Paula looked at him skeptically. "No, of course, not now. Whenever you want." Young people were walking to the bus stop, continuing their pleasant conversation. Andrea was beaming with happiness. He kept cracking jokes and telling the girl funny stories to impress her. Paula was glad that Andrea turned out to be a very pleasant person, and she enjoyed talking to him. "Need help getting home?" Andrea asked. "No, thank you. It's late already." You need to get back home and rest before the new workday, Paula replied. Andrea didn't object. He was indeed terribly tired, and this brief interaction was enough for him to feel almost happy. Home, Paula? The same morning driver asked. Paula nodded and settled back by the window, wanting to savor the pleasant feelings she had after her walk with Andrea. The bus carried latecomers who were eager to get home quickly, making it peaceful on board, allowing passengers to indulge in their thoughts. The next morning turned out to be unusually kind. The alarm clock didn't ring because it was a day off. Paula didn't rush to get out of bed. She luxuriated in her favorite pajamas, reminiscing about the previous evening. Finally, she got out of bed, opened the curtains, and was greeted by bright sunlight, momentarily dazzling her. Why did I take so long to accept his advances? He turned out to be an exceptionally pleasant young man, Paula thought. Paula had a small cozy apartment inherited from her mother. It consisted of a small kitchen, a combined bathroom, and a small room serving as both her bedroom and living room. It was very bright and sunny, just like the apartment's owner. The decor was modest yet tasteful, reflecting the inhabitants' love for spending time in a homely atmosphere. After her morning routine and a customary cup of coffee, she decided to visit her neighbor, Senor Moreno. "Oh, Paula. I'm delighted to see you," the elderly gentleman greeted his neighbor warmly as she entered. He lived alone, just like Paula. Despite his age, he looked very neat. His graying hair and thoughtful gaze made him even more attractive for conversation. As always, he wore a light-colored shirt with three-quarter rolled-up sleeves. He politely stepped aside from the entrance to let Paula in. She entered the apartment, a place she loved to be in. It was a small apartment filled with interesting souvenirs and numerous books. Photographs hung on the walls, seemingly telling Senor Moreno's life story. He was a scholar, and the entire setup of his small apartment was a testament to that. He was still engaged in research, so his desk was cluttered with notebooks and sheets of paper with notes. "Can I offer you some coffee?" "I also have some cheese left," Moreno offered. Paula nodded. The man disappeared briefly but returned soon after. He had prepared some snacks for himself, so everything was ready. "Here, enjoy." Moreno placed a tray with aromatic coffee and cheese slices on the edge of his desk and pulled a chair for Paula to sit. "Did you come back late yesterday?" "Unfortunately, I didn't hear you opening the door because I took a sleeping pill," he asked concernedly. He treated Paula like his own daughter, so he always worried when she came home late. As usual, Paula gestured. As she said this, there was a spark in her eyes that Moreno noticed, a sparkle he hadn't seen before. "Wait a minute, what's with the gleam in your eyes?" Moreno looked at her interestedly. Paula blushed. Her face gave her away. But after all, she came here to share her impressions from yesterday. Her only close person had long left this world, and now she was sharing her impressions with this elderly gentleman, whom she treated like a father. "Is he the one who used to court you?" Moreno looked at Paula inquiringly. She nodded. "You took quite some time, my dear, marinating him." "Testing him?" "No, I was just afraid," she replied with gestures. "There's nothing to be afraid of. If I had doubted in my time, I wouldn't have achieved anything in science. Don't be afraid of anything, girl. Life gives us many opportunities, and the main thing here is not to miss them. Even if your relationship doesn't evolve into something more, you'll gain the most valuable thing a person can have in this life, the joy of companionship. You'll keep with you the greatest life experience and pleasant memories." Paula always listened to his advice. After all, Moreno had lived a long life and was a very wise man. After these words, they started on their coffee and chatted for a long time, pondering over the twists of fate. The day off flew by unnoticed. The next morning, Paula once again jumped off her alarm clock. But this time, she didn't linger in bed for too long, because she had a morning meeting with Andrea, and she didn't want to miss it. "Hello, Paula," she heard the familiar greeting. But today it brought her much more pleasure. "Hope everything's fine with you?" Andrea inquired. The girl nodded and smiled in response. "I'll be waiting for you in the evening." The young man's words sounded so firm that the girl didn't even object. This time she wasn't late, and Manuel had no reason to scold her. They engaged in their usual work and started preparing the hall for the guests. Suddenly, the cafe's doors swung open, and the owner burst into the room. He never came this early, so his appearance surprised everyone. "Why are you staring as if you've seen the devil? Can't recognize your owner? You're all going wild. I'll tell Pedro to be stricter with you. I give you 10 minutes. A very important guest will arrive soon, and everything must be top-notch," he said before disappearing into his office. The entire staff busied themselves in anticipation of the big guest mentioned by the owner. And he didn't keep them waiting long. "Is this where I'm supposed to celebrate my 70th birthday?" A distinguished elderly man appeared at the cafe's door. "Father, I've been waiting for you." Enrique stepped forward to meet the elderly man. He was the boss's father. His name was Francisco. In dealing with others, he was just as unpleasant as his son. "Not bad, not bad. Finally, I've found a comfortable place to celebrate my jubilee. I suggested this option to you immediately." "Yes, indeed, you were right. Although, honestly, I didn't think you could manage the business competently. You never believed in me. Because you're incompetent. Surely you invited a bunch of designers here to create something like this." "No, it's all my Angela. Only her ideas and creative approach. I never thought I'd say this, but your wife definitely has taste." "She's really talented," Enrique replied, truly loving his wife. "We should invite your mother here. Let her take a look with her feminine eye and order the menu." "Yes, father, trust mom. She'll do everything right." The celebration was planned for a month later. Enrique was an exemplary son. The kind who tries to please his parents. Especially his father. But not because he loved him very much. He harbored an animal fear. The fear of being humiliated and insulted. It had been in him since childhood. From the moment Enrique witnessed the humiliation of his mother, Lucia. "What kind of poison did you serve me for breakfast? Do you want to get rid of me as soon as possible?" "No, I never even thought of such a thing." "You scoundrel, you dare to argue with me. Try what's in my plate yourself." The man grabbed the woman by her hair and thrust her face into his breakfast. She burst into tears and ran into the next room. From that incident, which became his first conscious memory, the boy witnessed his father's mistreatment of his mother. "Mom, why does Dad treat you like that?" Enrique once asked his mother. "Sweetie, your father gets really tired from work, so sometimes he loses control. Don't pay attention. Your dad is a good person," she replied. She always defended her husband and never showed her weakness to her son. Lucia didn't want Enrique to become as vulnerable as she was. But the scenes of humiliation and cruelty couldn't help but affect the character of the little boy. Loss of control soon extended to Enrique himself. His father started raising his hand at him for the slightest mistake. "Son, how are things at school?" "Everything's fine." "What do you mean, fine?" "Explain." "Behavior, grades?" "Everything's okay." "I'd like a specific answer." "My grades are fine." "Is anyone bullying you at school?" "Yes." "I never thought my son would become a victim." "Never dare to give in to anyone." "Defend yourself," the father said, swinging and hitting his son with full force before the boy could dodge, catching the blow and falling. "What are you doing?" "He's your son." Lucia rushed to her son to pick him up. But the man immediately dragged her away. "Don't interfere in men's business. Know your place." With these words, he hit the woman. "Mom!" Enrique shouted, trying to shield her from the enraged father. But he pushed him away like a kitten and continued to beat the woman. The 7-year-old child was powerless against the adult man. It hurt him even more. He realized he couldn't protect his mother from the tyrant father. Enrique grew up in such an environment. Over time, violence became quite usual for him, and he intervened less and less for his mother. And he even got used to his father regularly beating him. After all, he was very tired from work. But let's return to our Paula, who was already hurrying to meet Andrea. Do you remember, you invited me to INAGU Park? Paula asked with gestures. Of course, I remember, Andrea confidently gestured back. He understood that their relationship was developing since the girl was interested in that place. I would like to visit there. But for now, tell me about it, the girl asked. Oh, it's a very picturesque place. It can rightfully be called a small country with its own animal and plant world. You can see rare animals here that are hardly found in the wild. And the bright colors of the rich flora will dazzle you. There are always many people here, but everyone can find something to enjoy. What animals can you see here? Paula asked. She loved all kinds of animals and had long wanted to have one. White swans. Do you like these animals? I can watch them swimming on the water surface for hours. And notice, they aren't bothered at all. It's like they're on a mirror. And how graceful they are. Yes, it's hard to argue with that. We can sit on the lawn, bring some snacks, and spend the whole day watching them. Great idea. Let's do it soon. Paula began to understand that they had a lot in common. They enjoyed the same things. Andrea, like Paula, cherished every moment that this rich world offered him. She hadn't found any flaws in it yet, nothing irritated her. This was the richness of communication that Mourinho had talked about. Indeed, nothing could replace it. You could spend hours doing what you love, but if you have no one to share your feelings with, joy becomes fleeting. Andrea was on cloud 9. Her lack of perfection didn't bother him at all. It seemed he didn't notice it at all. After all, he had almost mastered sign language, overcoming all obstacles that could hinder their communication. So, after pleasant conversations, he escorted her to the bus stop, where they said goodbye until the next day. Finally, the anniversary day arrived. Since early morning, Enrique had been bustling around the cafe, making sure everything was in order and nothing was overlooked. Pedro, have the seafood arrived? He asked. Yes, boss. Everything's here, Pedro replied. And the fresh flowers? Father likes them freshly cut. Yes, they'll be delivered any minute now. The tablecloths must be spotless. And make sure the dishes are polished to perfection. Otherwise, neither of us will hear the end of it. Father is terrifying when he's angry, Enrique grimaced, his words amusing him, but Pedro was in no mood for jokes. It looks so stylish in here. The first guests who entered the hall immediately complimented the cafe's interior. And what fashionable furniture made of redwood, others chimed in. Indeed, the cafe had undergone significant changes before the anniversary. With the help of his wife and mother, Enrique had made some adjustments, even acquiring some new furniture that now perfectly matched the cafe's color scheme. The chairs even had wrought iron legs, adding elegance. Glass partitions completed the overall picture. These changes added to the grandeur of the upcoming event. Well done, son. I knew I could rely on you, Francisco said after surveying the hall. It was evident that he was pleased with the changes that had occurred over the past month. Don't mention it, Dad. Thank our women instead. Francisco approached his wife to kiss her, but Lucia turned away. What's wrong? Her husband asked. Nothing. It's just not appropriate. There are too many guests here. The hall was indeed already full, and the celebrant had to seat numerous friends and relatives, which he promptly did. A festive atmosphere filled the hall. Beautiful and excited guests approached Francisco repeatedly to congratulate him and share a glass of wine. Only 2 people felt particularly tense that day. Enrique worried that everything would go smoothly, while Lucia was about to take a very serious step that would change her entire life. Lucia, why aren't you eating anything? Are you feeling unwell? Francisco noticed that his wife hadn't touched her food. No, I'm not sick. I just don't feel like eating. I don't understand. Are you doing this on purpose? What exactly? You're irritating me. Let's not do this today or here. Francisco calmed down a bit and turned his attention back to the guests. Conversations flowed at the lively table, interrupted only by the clinking of glasses and beautiful congratulations to the birthday celebrant. Everything went as planned. Waiters worked in the hall, and Paula and Manuela appeared from time to clear away the accumulated trash. Few paid attention to them, though they made sure not to miss anything. It was necessary to serve the guests promptly and efficiently. "Can I offer you some more wine? Would you like some seafood snacks?" echoed throughout the evening. The guests were satisfied. Francisco couldn't help but notice, but he belonged to the category of people who were very sparing with praise. His relatives didn't expect it from him either. Least of all did Lucia want to hear pleasant words from him tonight. After many years of humiliation and insults, she had finally decided to divorce him. Their son was already an adult and stood firmly on his own 2 feet. He would surely understand and accept her decision. After all, he witnessed all the atrocities his father committed. And she endured these humiliations for the sake of her son, so that he could grow up in a complete family and want for nothing. Yes, he would understand. Her boy was not like his father. She had tried to make sure there was as little malice and hatred in him as possible. When the guests began to disperse, she took Francisco to a utility room so that no one could overhear their conversation. It was the same place where the cleaning supplies were kept and where Paula and Manuela occasionally rested. "What did you want to tell me?" Francisco began to flirt with his wife, slightly intoxicated and relaxed. He approached her to kiss her, but Lucia stopped him. "Francisco, I want to have a serious conversation with you." "So serious that you don't want to kiss your husband?" He tried to pull her towards him again, but she dodged him. "I want a divorce," Lucia said seriously and confidently. Francisco had not yet grasped the meaning of the words spoken. He held the woman by the hands and looked at her with a bewildered gaze. For a moment, it was possible to forget everything and rush back into his embrace. But Lucia had already made up her mind. "I'm leaving you," Lucia said, more confidently now. "Where are you going?" Francisco continued playfully, still not understanding the seriousness of the situation. "I've already filed for divorce." "What divorce?" "You're joking, dear. You must be tired. The guests will leave soon, and we'll go home. Just listen to me, finally. I'm leaving you. I don't want to endure your humiliations anymore. I've had enough." Lucia couldn't hold back anymore. "What did you say? You're leaving me?" Francisco was starting to sober up a bit and understand what was happening. "Yes. And this is after everything I've done for you? After so many years together. You never lacked anything. I did everything to ensure our family lived comfortably." Francisco was starting to boil with anger. "I don't need anything from you," Lucia replied calmly. "And you won't get anything, ungrateful creature. Not even the divorce. No one has ever left me. I have evidence of your cruelty, photographs, hospital records, witnesses. So, they'll believe me. They'll grant the divorce even without your consent." "Oh, I see. Evidence. You've decided to put me behind bars." With these words, Francisco lunged at the woman and grabbed her by the throat with both hands. His face turned crimson with rage as he began to choke her. Lucia tried to free herself by grabbing his hands, but Francisco was much stronger. She was already starting to suffocate when Paula entered the storage room. Without a second thought, she immediately rushed to the couple and tried to pull Francisco away. But he was much stronger than her. Moreover, he was in a state where a person could commit any madness. She leaped onto him from behind, hoping to distract him. But Francisco threw her off like a kitten. Paula flew into the corner and hit the wall, momentarily knocked out. But she quickly regained consciousness and began to look for something to stun him with. She saw a container with some liquid and immediately grabbed it. Paula flew towards Francisco and struck him with the container on the head. The man fell immediately, blood streaming from his head. Frightened, Paula ran out of the storage room and fled. Enrique had been in the hall all this time. He hadn't been drinking because he needed to oversee the progress of the celebration, spend time with all of his father's friends and comrades. But he also didn't forget about his family. Although the latter seemed to have disappeared somewhere. He had to see the guests off by himself. "Have you seen my father?" he asked Pedro, who had been in the hall all this time. "No, I lost sight of him a long time ago. And my mother is missing too." Suddenly, Enrique's father entered the hall. He walked unsteadily and held a bleeding wound on his head. "Father, what happened?" Enrique exclaimed in horror, rushing to his father. "Where's Mom?" His father was barely able to speak. All he could do was point a finger at Paula, who appeared in the hall after him. She approached the host and gestured to indicate that she was responsible for what happened. The restaurant called the police. Lucia had been in the storage room all this time. She sat in the corner of the room, feeling distressed. "Mom, what happened?" Her son ran up to her and saw the bruised marks on her neck. Enrique understood everything instantly, and at that moment, fear enveloped him. This was the extreme he feared most. He had lived his whole life in fear that one day, in a fit of anger, his father would simply kill his mother. And it almost happened now. If it hadn't been for Paula, whom he also mistreated, like his father mistreated his mother. How much courage she had, in that fragile, silent girl. It took the police quite some time to obtain coherent testimony from Lucia. Fortunately, cameras were installed in all areas of the cafe, so reproducing the events was not difficult. Enrique, while reviewing these recordings and especially listening to how his father covered his dear, tender mother with dirt and filth, couldn't hold back. Tears slowly rolled down his face, and childhood memories, which he had long tried to forget, resurfaced before his eyes. Paula approached him, gesturing to communicate and ask for forgiveness, but the man suddenly fell to his knees, embraced the legs of his savior, and burst into loud sobs. "Well, finally. I've been waiting for you." As usual, Andrea greeted Paula at the university entrance. "Helping someone again?" "Yes, a teacher asked me," Paula replied with gestures. "Well, you can't be so accommodating. Think about yourself or about me, finally. I've been waiting for an answer from you for 3 years." Paula looked at him and gently kissed him. Yes, for 3 whole years, Andrea had been waiting for her answer to his proposal of marriage. She wasn't refusing, not exactly. It's just that lately, her life had undergone such significant changes that she simply didn't have the time to take another decisive step in her life. Everything changed after that dreadful day. Enrique, the owner of the ill-fated cafe, helped her get into university. That was his way of thanking her for saving his mother. Since then, Paula's life had taken a new turn. She was a smart girl, so she studied with enthusiasm. And the teachers, seeing her potential and eagerness, tried to help her in every possible way. And all this time, her beloved was by her side. "We're having lunch at Lucia's today. Didn't you forget?" Andrea asked. And they quickened their pace to not be late. The couple rang the doorbell of the apartment. Lucia appeared at the doorstep. And this time, her life had also changed. Her husband was in prison. And she was starting anew. With new thoughts, new desires, in a new environment. "I'm so glad to see you." The woman couldn't hide her emotions and burst into tears. Old wounds had not yet healed, and she often gave in to her feelings. "Hello, Lucia." "We're very happy too," Andrea said. They went inside, and while Lucia busied herself with lunch and setting the table, they continued their conversation. "Paula, what else do I need to do for you to finally make a decision?" "What are you talking about?" Lucia asked. She was bustling around them and couldn't help but notice that they were discussing something. "Oh, just nothing," Andrea replied. I also have a proposal today, from which Paula is unlikely to refuse. But first, I invite you to the table. Everything is ready, Lucia said. They sat down at the table. Over lunch, they chatted cheerfully, like old friends. Lucia and Paula indeed became closer and very friendly. They had a lot in common in fate and character. Paula, I have a proposal for you, Lucia unexpectedly interrupted their casual conversation. Paula looked at her questioningly. Enrique and I are opening a center to help victims of domestic violence. And we would like to see you as a co-founder. An unexpected proposal, Paula switched to sign language. I'm not asking you to answer right now. Think about it. Yes, we'll think about it, Andrea replied. Exactly 1 month had passed since that meeting. Paula had agreed to become a co-founder, and today was supposed to be the grand opening of the new center. Paula, I'm so nervous. This is a truly important event for me. I endured humiliation for a long time myself, so I want as few people as possible to experience what I had to go through, Lucia said. Everything will be fine. You're doing everything right, Paula replied. At that moment, Enrique approached. From the very first day, he had been helping his mother realize this idea. All the financial support came from him. Mom, how are you? He asked. I'm nervous, honey, Lucia replied. You're doing everything right, he said, then turned to Paula, who had stepped aside not to interfere. How's our savior? He asked. Everything's good, Paula gestured with a thumbs up. How's your studying? Paula smiled and indicated that she really enjoyed it. Thank you. If it weren't for your courage, I could have lost the most precious person. I'll be forever grateful to you for that, Enrique said. Lucia, it's time to start, the administrator interrupted Lucia, Enrique, and Paula's conversation. The guests have already gathered. Yes, I'm ready. Paula, you're coming with me, Lucia said. The girl was surprised by the suddenness. Yes, of course. You're a co-founder of the center, so your place is on the stage. When they stepped onto the stage, they were momentarily blinded by the spotlight. But the enthusiastic applause quickly put them at ease. They approached the microphone, and Lucia addressed the audience. I'm very pleased to welcome you all here today in this hall at the opening of our center. I believe I'm doing a very important thing. For a long time, I was a victim of domestic violence and I know about it firsthand. Standing next to me is a person to whom I owe my salvation. This girl's name is Paula. She, like me, will become a co-founder of the center. And together we can help thousands of people. This girl is mute, but I believe she has something to say today. After these words, Paula approached the microphone and with gestures said, Yes, I agree. A man sitting in the front row jumped up and shouted to the whole hall, She agrees. Agrees to be my wife. No one needed an explanation of those words. The hall rose in unison and began to applaud. Whether it was for Lucia for her noble initiative or the young couple who were about to become a family, it didn't matter. What mattered was that everything we do has a happy ending. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.